aviation space is growing and growing at a rapid pace. While there's a lot of potential for immense growth, it comes with its own challenges as well. Today we're in conversation with one key player as far as the Indian aviation space is concerned, a player that dominates more than 20% of the market share. I have the privilege to have the conversation with the MD and CEO of Air India, Campbell Wilson. Campbell, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
A new office, a new branding, a new chapter as far as the airline is concerned. We'll talk about Vihan and what the vision is for the airline going forward, but how has it been for you ever since you took over? There's a lot that's happening. So how would you see the last, say, year that's gone by for you personally?
Oh, goodness, I've been here 18 months now, and I think I've described it before as being probably the most exciting job in aviation, and that certainly proved to be true in all sorts of ways. But it's been just fantastic being in India, sensing the support for a new Air India, sensing the enthusiasm and keenness of the team, but also the population for this mammoth undertaking that is underway. It's been a very, very interesting 18 months, and I'm super excited by what's ahead.
Campbell, you've spoken about Vihan, which is Vihan.ai, as far as the transformative plan for the airline is concerned. What is interesting in that is that it's not an immediate plan, but a long-term plan as far as the airline is concerned for about 5 years. So how would you say that how much has been achieved and how much more is there to achieve as far as your own long-term plan for the airline is concerned?
Well, it was 5 years simply because of the magnitude of the task. We're bringing an airline from public sector, some years of underinvestment into what we hope is amongst the best in the world. We're merging 4 airlines into 2. We're relocating 63 offices into 1. We're rebranding 2 airlines. We're completely replatforming systems. We're recruiting thousands of people and obviously 470 aircraft on order. So not all of this can happen overnight, which is why we'd phased it out. The first 6 months really was about triaging the problem, fixing the accumulated issues over the many years that had passed. This current year, which we're nearly 2/3 of the way through, is about building the platforms that will allow us to scale and improve considerably next year. So we're just at the cusp of this massive growth. We're now taking an aircraft every 6 days. We're less than about 9 months away from starting the full refit of all of our wide-body aircraft with new seats and in-flight entertainment systems. So I think we are absolutely on track for where we wanted to be. Now, I know that people's expectations is very, very high, and they wish that we were further ahead. So do we. But it just takes time to do a transformation of this magnitude.
Yeah, we'll talk about the measures that have already come into place as far as the transformative journey is concerned. But let's begin just with the look and feel. I was at the brand unveil event, and there were a lot of expectations because there was a lot of expectations in terms of what would Air India do to earmark the next chapter going forward, just in terms of the look and feel, the new brand identity, the Jharokha still being there, Aubergine coming in as part of Vistara. Talk to me about the kind of talks that went behind the curtains, back and forth, in terms of what was your idea or what you wanted to present to the world.
Well, I think there were 2 things that we needed to make sure we didn't lose sight of. One was the history and legacy of Air India, the colours, the window device, the association all the way back to J.R.D. Tata. And then, of course, the new India that we want to represent, and the fact that we do want to be seen and recognised as a world-class global airline that represents the India of today and tomorrow. And merging those 2 together is not the easiest process. It's a very subjective process as well. Of course, then we also wanted to consider the heritage of the different airlines that are coming in to the future Air India, Vistara obviously coming in at some point. So it was I think we were surprised how easy the process was, because I think what has ultimately been released and manifest does capture all of the things. Now, people are going to have different opinions, but look, the first A350 flight that we just had after an aircraft was painted going back to Toulouse for some final work, 25 million people followed that flight
Yes.
live online.
Yes.
So it just shows the level of interest in the airline, in the aircraft, and probably a little bit in what the aircraft looked like as well.
I remember that day I'd seen a tweet from the Air India office where on flight radar I saw all your employees watching it as well. So that would make you feel good as far as the response that has come as far as the new brand is concerned.
Oh, look, I think employees were all bought into it as a matter of course, but there's 25 million people from outside the company looking at it. That gave us some great validation.
Okay. Campbell, let's now talk about the brass tacks in terms of the aircraft order, in terms of what you want to do in terms for consumer services, etc. But let's begin with the big mammoth order that came, over 400 aircraft. Nobody had heard of something similar in the past. Two things that I want to understand. One, this 470, where does it fit as far as the long-term vision for the airline is concerned? Also, if you could help me as far as the delivery timeline is concerned.
Well, I think there's a significant need to refleet for Air India. There are a number of aircraft that are in the process of retiring or being returned to lessors. There's also a significant product upgradation process that we are underway, both with legacy aircraft and these new ones that will come in. And there's also a huge expansion opportunity domestically, but particularly internationally. I've said before that at the time we took over, India as a country had less than 50 wide-body aircraft, where many much smaller countries had multiples of that. And so there's a huge need to acquire aircraft to do those three things. Will this be the last aircraft order Air India ever makes? Absolutely not. There will be continued orders for refresh, for replacement, for growth. But this is a very strong statement of intent of our confidence in the market, the opportunity that is present before us, and the level of investment that we're prepared to put into the business to build this new Air India.
But Campbell, as far as the delivery timeline is concerned, there have been some delays. Has that been a setback?
Well, I think we're talking just a matter of a few months. We've got three aircraft already on the books in terms of A350s. They're a couple of months late, but that's to be expected in a returning aircraft that have been mothballed for a while since they were originally produced. But I think we're on track to receive all 6 of those aircraft by March, April of next year, which is roughly in line with what we had hoped. The 737s that are coming into Air India Express, we should receive 20 by the end of the financial year as opposed to the expected 24. But we still expect the full 50 by the end of 2024. So it's natural with aircraft, there's a little bit of give and take, but generally speaking on track.
That's good to hear. I just want to make a slight deviation. When we talk about such mammoth aircraft order, the immediate concern also is the resources to manage the kind of aircraft that you'll be getting. For example, the crew, the pilots, etc. Specifically to pilots, there have been some concerns with other airlines of late as well. Shortage of pilots, salary issues, all those other issues as well. How is Air India as an airline trying to iron those issues parallelly while you get the new aircraft, but to also ensure that you have resources to cater to it?
Well, it's been something that we've been aware of for some time. Ever since Takeover, there was an intention to grow the fleet. And so there was a staffing up of the narrow-body training pool, the induction plan, very early on. And so we've been preparing for this for 18 months or a little bit longer. And so we've been training people, giving people experience on different aircraft types, upgrading people so they get the requisite experience and abilities. So this isn't happening overnight. There's a little bit of constraint here and there when we're bringing in aircraft that are new to India and aircraft that perhaps there's not a big operating base in India, such as the 777. But those are temporary things that all airlines go through and we're working through. So we've been recruiting 550 cabin crew a month. We've got a solid pool. In terms of the aggregate number of pilots, we're good. It's just those little nuances that we need to iron out.
Just on the issue of pilots itself, Campbell, there have been a few very unfortunate episodes that have happened with fatigue issues being reported, issues as far as working hours. Is that a concern that you've spoken within the airline to try and hear the concerns of the crew to maybe iron those issues out as far as maybe working hours or deliverables that can be reworked?
Well, I think that there's 3 things. One, we've been very, very focused on encouraging and putting systems in place to facilitate voluntary reporting, whether that's fatigue, safety or any other things. Previously, it was a manual process. Now it's an electronic one. Anyone in the company can just do a QR code scan and report whatever they observe. Secondly, in our rostering system, which is a completely new state-of-the-art one that we're in the process of final stages of rolling out, it includes a module called the Boeing Alertness Module, which is very scientifically validated algorithms that can assess whether a roster is fatiguing, both during the planning part, but also as the crew experience the roster. And so we can validate whether there's any scientific basis for fatigue. And then, of course, if people report fatigue, we have processes to investigate, make sure that we are doing the right thing with respect to roster, that there's education on how crew can manage fatigue, how we as a company can help people manage fatigue. It's a very important subject. It's certainly one that we don't take lightly, but we address it through many different ways.
I really appreciate the honesty and the clarity on those lines, Campbell. Moving forward, I want to talk about as far as the mergers on the anvil, some that have already happened. For example, the event that happened in Mumbai where we did see the new identity, Air India Express. I want to understand first, how do you see that as part of the growth for the airline at large? And then we'll talk about what we can expect from Vistara.
Sure. Well, Air India Express, the new Air India Express, which is the amalgamation of the two previous carriers, is going to be a significant player in the future Air India. It will operate probably in the majority of the domestic fleet.
Okay.
It will certainly have a significant presence in the international 3-4 hour range space. It is really going to be people's probably first experience of air travel.
I was about to ask that, yeah.
And a very strong carrier of people, leisure, friends and family. And so we're putting a lot of resources into it. This year alone, they'll take 50 aircraft. They'll basically double in size by the end of 2024. And a significant proportion of the 400 narrow-body aircraft that we had purchased will be going to Air India Express and, of course, the domestic market. So Air India Express, very important part of the group going forward.
Now let's talk about Vistara. Now, ever since the merger was announced, a lot has been said simply because of the fact of the kind of legacy that brand Vistara has and the connect it has with the consumers. So I want to ask a direct question. Is there a possibility going forward that yes, the merger will happen, but the two brands can live separately?
No, I think we've been very clear consistently that eventually the future airline is Air India. It's the name that has 90 years of history. It is globally recognized, globally respected. And so I think in future the airline will be Air India. But we're not going to rush into that point. Vistara is a very well regarded airline, very well run airline. And so as we complete the regulatory journey of getting the competition clearances, we've got one country left to secure, we can start working more closely together to share knowledge between the two airlines, to level up Air India to Vistara and ideally beyond. And then at that point we can take a call of when do we merge the two airlines from a brand perspective. We're not going to be rushing into it. We respect the folk at Vistara and we want to learn from them and we want them to come and contribute to us.
But was this at any point a concern that if you merged the brand Vistara, you possibly were letting go of a big chunk of loyal consumers? And the reason that I ask you this is because every time you speak to a consumer who's been loyal in terms of taking flights, Vistara is a name that they would want to use in the top of their list. So is that a worry that if there is a slight slip also, there could be a big chunk going away?
Well, that is Air India's challenge, to rise to the occasion. And we're putting a huge amount of investment in aircraft and people and systems and brand, in in-flight product, to get to that level and beyond. And so I think if we do that successfully, people will want to make the transition to the new Air India.
So Campbell, could you just help us understand how much more is left in terms of the merger? Any timeline that you're looking at?
Well, we've got to get regulatory clearance, as I say, from a competition perspective. There's also the NCLT process that we need to go through from a legal perspective. And then we operate two regulated airlines, and we need to merge the two regulated entities. So there's three very significant phases we need to go through before we even get to brand and customer touch points. So it's not a short process. If you look around the world at other airline mergers of a similar scale, it can be 2 or 3 years. We think that it will be done faster than that, but ultimately competition law, company law, aviation regulation, they all have to be satisfied.
Yeah, and this is something that we were discussing before we started the interview, that the processes are very tedious, looks a lot easier on paper. The other aspect, Campbell, that I want to discuss with you is ever since, the Tatas came back in the cockpit or in the captain's seat as far as Air India is concerned, the big question was what happens with the legacy of the Maharaja, or what happens to Maharaja? Will it continue to exist? Will it be completely done away with? And then you gave us a hint or a clarity on the unveil event and said that in some form it will still be there. But from then to now, we really haven't seen much of it. So could I expect a lot more in days to come, or would you want to tell us what happens to brand Maharaja?
Well, I think it gets subsumed into the broader story of the next 100 days, really, because this year has been about building platforms and preparing for this massive growth. It's also been building the new brand. We revealed it, but we haven't launched it yet, fully across all of the touch points. So in the next 100 days, you'll see the A350 with the new livery. You'll see the brand roll out across the world, across all airports and all touch points, including the Maharaja. You'll see new uniforms for crew. You'll see a new website, new app. You may see a new loyalty program if we can deliver on time. But this next 100 days really is when all of your questions are going to be answered.
Okay, interesting. I think that will be a lot of interest for the consumers. Campbell, I want to shift our focus now to some specific passenger customer issues. There have been some safety issues with the airline. The regulator has suspended the chief of safety. We've had multiple reports just in the last few months. How concerning does that become from an airline perspective, and the word of reassurance that you would want to give to passengers and customers as well?
Look, safety is the number one priority. It is always the number one priority. It is also a regular practice in the industry of every airline to undergo audits. Audits that they commission themselves, audits that the domestic regulator does, audits that the international regulatory bodies undertake. And those audits reveal gaps, improvements, opportunities. And we take those opportunities seriously. That's part of why the industry is progressively becoming so safe, is that there's an open culture of identifying issues and then addressing them. Now, of course, would we like not to have such issues? Of course we would rather not have such issues, but we take them seriously and we address them. There's a lot of gaps that accrue over years and years perhaps of underinvestment or maybe a culture that hasn't kept up with global standards. And we're putting a lot of effort into making sure that we resolve this. But I can give people 100% assurance that that is our absolute top priority.
The other aspect is, of course, that fine that has come in from the regulator. It's about 10 lakhs, and this is for ignoring consumer or passenger issues, as they say, passenger-centric norms. Now, this could include either delayed flights, providing accommodation, so on and so forth. Have you been able to identify the lags or where the issues were?
Whether it's weather, whether it's aircraft breakdown, whether it is some other factor, this industry does unfortunately have occasional delays or cancellations. And there are policies in place both from a company level and from a regulator level on how we handle people in such circumstances. And in this particular case, there was one flight that was deemed to not have been handled up to standard. And so we've looked at the lapses that have been pointed out to us, and we're building them back into our own internal processes and our training so that if such a thing happens again, which inevitably it will because we are talking about weather and machines, we do it better next time.
And it's also important to explain to our viewers that this is something that happens with every single airline. Unfortunately, sometimes one airline gets singled out in reportage, but it's a daily affair, whether it's domestic or internationally.
Well, I'd like to say it's not a daily affair for us, and it's probably not a daily affair domestically, but certainly on an international level it is. But the important thing is, how do we handle when things go wrong? Do we handle it well? Do we handle it consistently? And where we don't handle it well, do we learn and do better next time?
Yeah. Campbell, the other aspect that I want to understand is, and this is something that we've spoken to a lot of aviation experts, just to try and understand, and I want to get your sense, as far as the rise of unruly passengers are concerned, I don't know whether it's being reported more now, or is there just a sudden rise in unruly passengers, that very unfortunate P-Gate episode that happened. I want to go back to that episode. Have there been learnings? Could things have been done in a better fashion?
Yes, well, I think internationally it has been observed. IATA have commented that there was a significant rise in unruly passengers post-COVID.
Yes.
I think from our observation, it seems to have moderated a little bit because there has been more attention put by the world's airlines on this. At Air India, we've had our fair share. We certainly learned from that particular incident in a number of ways. One was in clarity of our policies to our staff, the training that we give to our staff, the manner in which we report such things internally and follow them up, the way that we report such things to the regulator, and also the actions that we take when a passenger is unruly after the fact. So, once a week or so, we actually are now suspending people who have misbehaved in some way. But I think it's getting better. It's always going to be with us. That's just the nature of mass transportation. But I think we're in a better place now than we were 9-10 months ago.
A sense of sensitivity also, I think, is needed for both the passengers as well as the crew to also understand what to do in a situation like this.
Absolutely, and that comes down to education of our crew, it comes down to socialization of our customers, it comes down to socialization of the ecosystem, whether it's airport handling staff or security staff employed by government or police that are representing at the airport. It takes everyone to understand the nature of the event and how best to handle it at the time.
A couple of last issues that I want to understand, Campbell. One, this is the holiday season. I was talking to somebody in office and they said, what is Air India's promise to consumers in terms of routes? What are these routes that you would want to either touch base upon, certain routes that you think you would want to maybe increase the frequency? What is the thought process as far as expansion of routes is concerned?
Well, I think we have stated in the past that we feel that India is underconnected based on its potential. We think that Air India can play a huge role in better connecting India, not just Delhi, India, to the key points in the world. There are a number of plans that we have, but it's not competitively wise for us to be sharing those before we're ready to actually put them on sale. But I can assure you that with the 470 aircraft we've got coming, plus leased aircraft also coming in, the footprint will be expanding significantly.
Because you spoke about competition, the last question that I want to understand from you, Campbell, is more and more as we see the growth and expansion of the Indian aviation space, unfortunately it looks like it's going towards a duopoly between Air India and Indigo, which could become a threat to the newer players, could also have a direct impact as far as prices, etc. are concerned. How do you see the factor of a duopoly playing as far as the Indian aviation space is concerned?
I don't think, it's not a duopoly now, and I don't think it would be a duopoly in steady state either. I think what has happened in most markets around the world, if you look back over the decades, is that there has been many players in a market, many of whom have struggled financially. There has been a period of consolidation, and then that consolidation has allowed for professionalism and profitability across the industry, which then encourages new players to join. And I think India is going through that phase at the moment. And so I think, to the extent that we can have well-capitalized, professionally run, expanding, globally oriented airlines, Indian airlines, I think that's good for Indian aviation. I think it's good for India. And I think it also portends an opportunity for more players to want to come into the market, and ultimately the customer will choose where they want to fly.
Perfect. Campbell, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.